Alrighty, so interesting video today. I did a Dana 60 swap on my DURAMAX here. I did a 2004 leaf spring Dana 60 from a Ford F350, and I loved it. Turned out pretty good. Everything went on nice and smooth. My only, I suppose, beef is with the whole setup is that the Ford uses an 8 by 170 millimeter bolt pattern, and Chevy is still old school 8 by 6.5 inches, which is basically 6.5 inches is 165 millimeter. So it's a 5 millimeter difference from the Ford and the Chevy bolt pattern. So what I did on the front axle is I had to get a 1.5 inch wheel adapter spacer, because right now these are Chevy wheels. And on the rear I had to keep using some 2-inch spacers, that way everything's like the same width. And I'm just not a fan of it. Like, I know a lot of people use wheel spacers and wheel adapters and they have great luck, and then also there's people who pull trailers a lot and they say, oh, it's fine, and then you also see people having their wheel fly off going down the highway, and it's just kind of like, well, I don't want to deal with that. So instead, a lot of people, they'll replace their Chevy rear axle with a Ford rear axle, the Sterling 10.5 inch differentials and all, but I personally would like to keep my GM style AAM axle, because these things are literally bulletproof, like the most indestructible axle for a light duty, or I guess mid duty truck. So what I did was I had an extra AAM axle laying around, so I pulled the hubs off, and also extra rotors laying around. And so I got a template here from a company called Moto Built, and they do a lot of Jeep stuff. And they also sell these templates, and they have them for the GM to Ford bolt pattern or Ford to GM bolt pattern, however you want to go. And a lot of people, what they do is they'll do the front axle unit bearings, and they'll drill the Chevy bolt pattern into those. But my problem with that idea is, if a unit bearing fails, you have to just replace the whole thing. They're not serviceable. An AAM rear hub, you can replace those bearings and you keep this hub as long as it doesn't get destroyed, which I've never seen one get destroyed. So you can keep rebuilding this hub every time, and you don't have to keep drilling a new bolt pattern when you may or may not be several hundred miles away from home. So that was my logic. So I looked around. Moto Built had these. So this is the Chevy bolt pattern, and then those little 1/8 holes all the way around is the Ford bolt pattern. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Just drop it on there, which of course that's now the Ford bolt pattern. So we'll come over here, line it up. I got some spacers and some lug nuts to push it tight, and that's where the holes go for the Ford pattern. And you start off with a 1/8 drill bit, and you just go up one drill bit size at a time to make sure everything stays square and true. That way your bolt pattern is as close as possible, and I got mine super close. And so I'm going to be going and getting some wheels in the next 3 days. I'm trading a guy my GM wheels for his Ford wheels. He's got another project. I have my project. But for now, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to put these. I have 2 of these wheels. One of them's already installed on the other side. This one's going to be going on this side, so I can test drive the truck. So I'm having everything prepped, so in the next 3 days I can trade the guy the wheels, and then the next couple of days, go to the tire shop, get my Ironman tires mounted onto the other rims, and I can get rid of the wheel adapters on the front. No more adapters on the whole truck. So that's where I'm at right now. Let's get started working on this thing. Alrighty, so there's a lot of YouTube videos out there, but I figured I would just do a quick little skim over. Basically, unbolt the bolts that were there, and the axle shaft just slides right out, just like that. And then there's a little retainer ring in here. If I can get it out with one hand, I don't know. Let's see if I can get it. Nope, I'm gonna have to put the camera down for a second. As I struggle, anyway. Okay, so there's a little C-clip. Well, retainer ring thing. And then that little guy comes out. See how that's loose? There's a preload you do, and then the bearings just kind of make themselves at home after a little bit. So you just get this pair of pliers or whatever, needle nose, and then you try and make it all behave itself. There we go, slid it out. There's the little lock, put it there with your retainer ring, and then you just kind of knock this little bearing loose here. There's a preload for these. You tighten them to 50 foot-pounds, and then you loosen them, and then you tighten them to 35, and then that's basically the preload on the bearings, and then the bearings will loosen themselves up a tad once you start driving the vehicle, because you're just putting a preload from the bearing race onto the spindle. And this oil's black. Need to change oil on this rear end eventually, but we'll do it after all of this. Drive the truck for a week or two and then dump the gear oil out. Alright, so there's that. And once I get the hub off, I will get the camera going again. Alrighty, hub came off. That one came off super easy compared to the driver's side. The driver's side, the bearing fell apart. These are not the bearing, the seal. These AAM axles use a two-piece seal, and it's kind of cool looking, honestly. I'll show you the new one here. Alright, so this is like, you know, obviously the seal, right? And then here, this is actually like an inner seal, and this black ring rotates in the seal. So it's kind of like it has its own little mini bearing going on. It's, I guess, similar to a mechanical seal on a water pump. But anyway, there it is. I already wiped it down. It seats right in there. Gonna spray some brake cleaner in there, get it cleaned up, and I'll pick up the camera once the other hub that has the new bolt pattern drilled into it is installed. Alright, so hub is on there, everything's just hand tight. I just snugged it up by hand to make sure that the rear hub seal slid onto the spindle nice and smooth, and sure enough, it just slid right on there, no problem. So now I have the hub nut socket here, and we have the torque wrench set at 50 foot-pounds. So I'm going to be snugging the hub nut to 50 foot-pounds while rotating the hub, and then we're going to back it off, loosen it up, and then, like I said earlier, snug it back down to 35 foot-pounds and see where the locking pin lines up. Okay, the nut has been snugged down to its last 35 foot-pounds, and as we can see here, where our little locking pin goes, right there, see how we need to tighten it up a little bit to line it up. And according to everybody on the internet and GM specs, you tighten it to the next nearest locking pin in that nut. So we're going to rotate it just a tad and get that pin in. Okay, and there we got the pin locked in there. We got the little retainer ring on. So now we're gonna clean up the surface, put a little bit of gasket maker on there, and slam the new axle on there, and start putting that other wheel on once the rotor and the caliper is bolted up. Everything going smoothly. This job takes roughly 20 minutes per side if you're just gonna replace the seals. If you're replacing bearings, that'll obviously probably take quite a bit longer, but if you're doing seals, yeah, like a 20-minute job per side if you know what you're doing. You got one of those guys to knock everything loose. Easy. Alrighty, just did some quick measuring just to make sure I was correct here. And the 99 to 04 Dana 60 from wheel surface to wheel surface is 69 inches wide. The AAM rear axle is 68 1/4 wide. So the rear end is 3/4 of an inch narrower than the Dana 60. So I don't think anybody's gonna notice 3/4 of an inch per side. And I don't really care about 3/4 of an inch, because the whole point of this conversion is to get rid of the adapters and the spacers and have the wheel bolt on straight to the hub just like God intended. Just like that. Now what a lot of people do when they do a Dana 60 swap using an 05 and the newer F250 axle, those I believe are 72 inches wide. And so you're kind of stuck if you want to match the axle width on the rear. You have to kind of use a spacer, or some people will get a dually rear axle, like from an F450 or F550 from the early 2000s. The dually rear end is a Dana 80, which is roughly about as strong as an AAM axle. Very close anyway. And they, I believe, are 72 or 73 inches wide, around there. So that can be an alternative if you're using a 05 and newer F250 Dana 60 front axle. But in my case, I wanted a 99 to 04 axle. That way it'd be as close to the same width as my factory rear AAM. That's just my own want and need, but there are options. So if you need a wider axle, you can just grab a dually rear end. If you're using the factory GM bolt pattern, then just grab a dually GM axle. And if you need the Ford bolt pattern, look around at the early to mid 2000s dually Dana 80 stuff. Alrighty. Got the little wheels on the back. We're doing 60, and she is nice and smooth. No vibrations or anything. I do have a pretty accurate feel for it because those back wheels are balanced, and the truck is perfect. It feels absolutely perfect. So Moto Built did a pretty good job making their templates. Everything turned out perfection. And we have our first stop of the adventure. Breakfast. And my beautiful co-pilot. Ready to rock and roll? What happened? Oh, well, there goes the hash browns. Brewski reporting in, making new friends at tire shops. He's having a really good day. Right, Brewski? Alrighty. So it is the next week. Got to San Antonio, traded the wheels to the other guy, and here's the new setup. 20 by 12s, negative 44 offset, with my Ironman 37s mounted back up again. And it looks good. Look at that. It looks pretty good. And so the front is hub-centric to the Ford hubs already. So for the rear, I need to get some hub-centric rings for these rims. because there's a little tiny bit of a gap. And since I want to do this right, I'm gonna need the hub centric rings. So there it is. It looks pretty good. Brew, why are you peeing on my wheel for? How rude. Anyway, there's the profile. Basically, the edge of the lugs here are level with my running board. And then the front is about half of a lug out. So, yeah, the rear end is about 1/4 of an inch narrower on both sides than the front. But I am not going to sweat those little details because now I have matching bolt pattern axles, no more wheel adapters and wheel spacers. You know, everything's bolted straight up just like it should be. So there it is. It's all done. Looks really good. I really like these wheels. They are Scorpion, what is it? Scorpion SC10 wheels. And that -44 offset looks really good. It's not too radical. Everything looks good. Let's see. Yeah, I got a nice profile. It's about level with the brake rotor. So it all looks pretty good there. There's the Dana 60 hiding up under there. Turned out pretty good. And it rides about like factory, honestly. It's not bad. I'm running shackles in the front. 52-inch GM C10 leaf springs. It's just a factory 4-pack with the overloads taken out. And right now the truck is about a 6-inch lift. It's basically the same height as my rough country 6-inch. So it sits pretty good. I do want to figure out how to lower it, which is my next thing. I might just go ahead and do a coil spring and radius arm, you know, custom setup. That way I can lower the truck like about 3 inches, maybe 2 or 3 inches. Of course, I'll probably have to cut my fender, which I already hit the fender yesterday. That's where the tire hit it and it kinked the fender here. So I'm already gonna have to cut the fender out right here. Probably just take this little edge out because I cut the bottom out there. So I'll probably bring this edge across like that. Take about 1/2 of an inch or so out of it. Because of the offset, you know, tire is gonna come in more because of it. But I would like to figure out how to lower the truck. I'm guessing around 2 or 3 inches. Just drop her down just a tad. Kind of like stuff 37s. Kind of like how Jeeps are. You know, you have those low center of gravity Jeep builds where people are running 37s or 40s and they're stuffing them. Well, I kind of want to do that. But it looks good the way the truck sits now, so I'm going to drive it around a little bit like this with the new wheel and tire setup and just see what the truck tells me it wants to do. So it turned out pretty slick. I like it. 12 wides with a 1250 tire has a really nice profile. Has a really nice profile. And that turned out good. My next project will be installing the transmission mount, because I already did motor mounts last month. I didn't bother making a video because no one wants to see motor mounts being removed. So motor mounts are done, transmission mount is next, and then I'm going to do cab mounts, because if you can see right in there, my body line does not match the bed. So I'm off by a little bit there. I'm probably going to try out the poly cab mounts, which I know everybody says they're stiff, but for 50 bucks on eBay, I'm kind of willing to try them out first. If I don't like them, then I'll swap them back out with the original rubber ones on the front, and then just get the updated rear ones for the rear stuff. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, there we go. And I did get them balanced. Truck rides down the highway real nice and smooth. Turned out great. Had a fun little day trip to San Antonio. Now I just need to figure out what else to do to this thing. Eventually, I need to find my 0102 HD grill and hood, but right now I'm going for functionality over cosmetics as far as the body stuff. Getting the Dana 60 done and set up correctly, and then getting the correct bolt pattern was a very high priority on the list. That way this truck stays as reliable as possible. So that's it for this video for now. Hopefully the next video coming up will be the C10. Gonna be putting the Chevy Sonic LTZ seats in there installed correctly, and start putting the interior together a little bit, and finish up the fuel system and get this thing on the road hopefully in the next couple months. I just need a K5 Blazer gas tank to put in the rear. And then also on the DURAMAX, another video I'm going to be doing will be putting a 45-gallon Suburban gas tank where the spare tire used to be under the bed over here. That way we can have capacity for road trips. So there's a lot of cool things I still have planned. This one will always be the priority since this is my work truck daily driver. And this one is the toy. This used to be the daily driver. Alright, but thanks for watching.